come up high on your chest, or he literally just jumps over your body, as many of your opponents will do in a competitive situation. Then the shoulder is so far away from the mat, you can confidently close up a two-handed strangle and take advantage of the use of two arms to finish your opponent rather than one. Now, we're looking at the idea of strangling from back crucifix position. It would be a real mistake on my part if I didn't add some element of strangulation where it's not really a back crucifix, but it's a position so closely related to it and so intimately tied up with the position that it would be a real oversight on my part if I didn't talk about it in this video. A position which I always encourage my students to make use of is what we often refer to as the garrote, plus in a particular seated position. A garrote is a situation where you have one of your opponent's defensive arms controlled. So you take your hand and grab the line of the knuckles, and you put your arm around your training partner's neck in a strangle position. Now, because you're only holding with one hand, you need to make use of your head, okay? You'll often hear me talking about loop theory or closed wedges in jiu-jitsu. A loop is closed when there's no escape avenue for your opponent. Do you see how there's a gap between my right hand and my chest? If Placido moved his head into that gap, your whole head, good. Keep going, keep going. That's how he would escape from me, okay? So you can see there's an opening in the loop that I have around his head, and if Placido's head goes through that opening, he escapes. However, if I put my strangle hand over the top and I put my chin onto my own hand, now when he goes to move his head in the same direction, there's no opening for him to get out of. There's a closed loop around his head. He has one defensive hand. If he was able to grab my hand, he could open the loop, and then his head could go out and escape. So what we want to make sure of is that when we close that loop, we keep it closed by using our head locking over the top, and I hide my thumb from him. If Placido grabs my wrist, he'll never be able to pull my hand down holding the wrist. Let's go, Placido. Use your newfound strength. It's tough. It's life. If he grabs my thumb, now he can do it. Yeah. Okay? So I want to hide my thumb from him. So I put my hand all the way around and I cover my thumb with my own head. So when Placido goes to take the hand off and open the loop, he can't do so. At any given moment, he has the ability to strangle him. It's a very tight one-handed strangle. But what we typically do in these situations is we force him to put a hand down on the mat, and then we just throw a foot around the corner, hook, and we convert the situation into a back crucifix. If Placido rips his arm free, you can always in these situations use your legs to go right back into the same situation and lock up your opponent and go in and attack. And of course, you can switch from one leg across the other. So you use this position. If he goes to pull the arm free and it comes out, you use your legs to go through and reclaim the position. If Placido manages to come up into a seated position and get away from it, then from here, we can always come right back and threaten the strangle, just as we are. And we can force that hand down to the floor, step over the top, and go right back into a good strangulation position. If, for whatever reason, he's able to limp his arm free, it's going to be up to us to go in and reclaim it. And if we can do so, we can play between this position, the garrote, and the back crucifix. If your opponent threatens to turn up in this direction, then I would recommend coming here, over the arm, so that when he goes to get up, it's easier for you to follow. Let's rotate back to the camera. And of course, the garrote can be used from prone positions just as easily as from supine positions. You can always feed that hand in and lock. And then from here, as he goes to defend himself, there's going to be opportunities for you to fight yourself back into the same crucifix position that you saw earlier and go in and finish. So what I often recommend to developing students is to start in a seated position behind an opponent with the garrote in place. Make sure your grip is correct, hand goes in and cover. And just rest with the position lightly here until you can start to feel that you're strangling just with the arm, stepping in over the top and locking up in various positions, strangling your opponent one-handed until it starts to feel familiar to you. If you can hold that garrote for periods of time, all the while threatening your opponent and keeping a closed loop around his neck, and then periodically using your legs to snatch his arm and convert between back crucifix and garrote, backwards and forwards between the two. You develop a tremendous sense of creating danger for your opponent throughout the time you're controlling the back position. Used together, the garrote and the back crucifix, you can become very, very dangerous to your opponent, even with just one arm around his neck. Now, let's go into the second horn of the dilemma when it comes to finishing people from back crucifix position. This is the use of arm locks. Now, arm locks can, of course, be used from rear mounted position, but you'll notice that there's something substantially different between rear mount versus back crucifix. Plus, if you took a seated position, if I'm behind someone in the rear mounted position and I decide that I want to switch off to an arm lock, maybe I've tried to strangle and it's just not working, things aren't going my way. The only way that I can make a transition to the arm lock is to completely change the game. Here, my right arm is the strangle arm. If I get frustrated and I have to switch to an arm lock, I have to take my strangle hand out and switch my attention completely into the arm lock itself. And you'll see that I'm no longer on my opponent's back. I'm no longer in a position to strangle with my arms. So there's a sense here in which if I decide I'm going to convert from strangulation to arm lock from rear mounted position, I have to make an either or choice. I can't have both at the same time. Here, my right arm is in a strangle position. If I wish to convert to arm lock, I have to take my arm out of a strangle position and then make a complete transition of my body into the arm lock situation. The great advantage of back crucifix is that you can play between the strangle and the arm lock without changing your position, so that you can simultaneously play both games at the same time, as opposed to the rear mount situation where you either play one or you play the other, but you cannot play both at the same time. So now let's look at back crucifix situation. Let's rotate just a little bit this way. Can I see that? Okay. Now, we have a range of really good arm lock options here. The first option is where I have my top leg controlling my opponent's arm. Do you remember, guys, that earlier in the video we talked about the idea of top leg and bottom leg? My top leg is on top of Placido's shoulder, and my bottom leg is underneath Placido's shoulder. If I lock with my top leg, our first arm locking option is to hook at close to the end of the lever, all the way up here by the wrist, and bring his wrist up above the shoulder line. Then we're going to trap our training partner's head. You can lock in palm to palm. You can lock in wrist to wrist, whichever you feel is better. As always, we're going to create a situation where we have a planted foot on the floor. We take our second foot and place it here on our own shin. And as a result, we can quickly create braking pressure. It's very, very strong. Now, a second way of operating in these situations, we can also create a strong arm lock pressure by locking a triangle. If you do lock the triangle, don't lock a full triangle, because now you're so far from the end of the lever that your opponent can easily twist and turn his wrist. So what we want to do is lock a half triangle, a semi-senkaku, just like so. And then from here, the finishing pressure is different. Instead of opening outwards, we open the knee outwards, like so. And from that knee position, we just bridge off the floor and we get our submission. So two variations here. The first is done with one leg here, no triangle locked. And then we bridge off the mat, tap, and we get a submission. The second is done by locking a half triangle and then opening, tap, our knee down and bridging off the mat. That's why we need our feet on the floor. Only when the feet are on the mat can we bridge off it and create braking pressure. Another good option from here is to throw our leg over our training partner's leg and form a grapevine. From situations like this, we can restrain our training partner when he goes to move around and twist and turn. It's difficult because of the closure we have over the leg. And then from here, we open up our knee and bridge into a strong finish. And this too is an excellent method of braking. So we have three excellent methods. The first involves just the use of the top leg. From that top leg,